Hi, good morning. Welcome to the AQA Paper 3 guided walkthrough through the Section A multiple choice. Okay, here we have a market for lemons. Now, when I see this, I always have like warning lights thinking this is kind of like a trick. So we have price going down. The only reason why you have an expansion in the demand for lemons is because the price of lemons is going down. So first of all, I'm going to disregard any factor that isn't the price of lemons affecting the demand. So for example, this is about substitutes, this is about lemonade, this is about complements. All of those things are going to shift the demand. They won't cause an expansion. So what could possibly be the answer? So this is when you learn like the trick is usually like the other curve is shifting. For example, if I have S1 shifting to S2, then the price will fall, so I will have an expansion in demand, and favorable weather will lead to just about that. Okay, next one. The environment is a scarce resource. A consequence of this is, right, firstly, I would personally disregard everything relating to natural resources and instead favoring the ones that have environment. When something is scarce, that means that the supply has a limit, and when you use it all up, there's no resources left for something else. That means you're going to have an opportunity cost when you use the environment. Public goods require non-rivalry as well as non-excludability, and that's not the case here. Okay, so we have next question 3, which is the price of peanuts and the number of cashews sold in 1 month. Peanuts are increasing in price a little bit. I don't know how much it is, like 5%, something small. And the percentage change in quantity demanded for cashew nuts looks to be like fairly large, maybe like 50% or so. Right, so we need to work out the XED. So XED is the percentage change in quantity demanded of one good divided by the percentage change in the price of the other good. We learned that the peanuts are increasing in price a little bit and the demand is increasing by a larger percentage. Now this should create a positive number and it should be quite large because the top is larger than the bottom. So we are looking for something like that, and just as a sanity check, I think it kind of makes sense. Cashew nuts and peanuts are both nuts, so they should be substitutes for one another, and substitutes have a positive XED. Okay, question 4. The main reason is that nominal income per head does not take into account. Okay, whenever I see nominal, I think that's kind of like a warning sign, and it's per head. The change in nominal income per head is an unsatisfactory indicator of the change in the living standards. Living standards is what you are able to afford or you have access to, the goods and services you have access to. That's usually determined by like your income, but sometimes the state will provide something like that. So by just looking at somebody's salary essentially or somebody's income per person, that's not going to be a good representation of their access to goods and services. As mentioned, like the government can intervene, or the big hint here I think is because of like inflation. If you have inflation, it will make your big income actually be able to buy much fewer goods, and it's not going to be easy to compare that over time because your inflation rate is always changing. So I reckon that is the answer. It's not population because they already said per person, like per head. They already gave you data that had accounted for that. So that would be the answer in my opinion. Right, here we have what looks like a circular flow. We have injections of investment, government spending and exports summing up to be 300 plus 1,000. And on the left-hand side, we have the leakages of savings, imports, and tax. How do I know to set one equal to the other? Because it says here that it's a macroeconomic equilibrium. Right, what else are we given to solve this? So by the way, usually to do these things, you have to kind of rearrange this equation to get like the missing values. So in this case, we need to get savings, tax, and imports. So I need to have values for all of these. I have some data on net exports at -50. What does that mean? Net exports is x minus m is -50. And it looks like I have export data to complement that. So exports is 300. Overall imports would be x plus 50. X is 300, so this looks like it would be 350. So I have worked out m as 350. And so I can disregard the rest. And then that gives these two options left. So all the leakages are currently adding up. All the injections are currently adding up to 1,000. And m is 350. That means my left-hand side also has to add up in total to 1,000. I already have 350 added to that, so I need to account for the remaining 650. And the only one that adds up to 650 in terms of savings and tax, which is the things that are left, is A. Right, question 6. Central bank is raising interest rates. And that's usually because there's high inflation. So high inflation, you usually want to raise interest rates. That is then going to decrease your AD and lower your price. That's part of, let's say, the objective of stable prices if inflation is too high. Now, I always watch out when I hear the word government because that's different to the central bank. So we have a government here that has objectives. Their objectives are usually like growth, low unemployment, stable prices, this kind of thing. So I'm looking for something like that. This is currently harming growth, right? You have output falling, therefore it's going to increase unemployment. The only thing that really benefits is the lower price, which suggests that it would be B. Okay, next question. We have flooding described as a once-in-a-century event. There's a sharp increase. Okay, for me, when I see like sharp, people have really reacted to that in a violent way. The number of residents who buy additional, that's interesting. Like additional is, they had flood insurance before, now they're super safeguarding themselves. Which of these combinations of biases in decision making are the residents most likely to have experienced? Okay, so here people had insurance before and suddenly they are going to get even more insurance. So this is maybe like an overcorrection. Maybe people are sort of like really fearful. That kind of thing I'm looking for. Obviously the flood was like just recent because it's like following the flooding. So my instinct already is to take note of availability bias. That's the bias when, something recent has happened and that kind of clouds your decision making. You weigh that factor more significantly than it should be. So for example, the flood could have been like a 1 in 100 year event, but you rushed to get flood insurance because for you it seems like last week. And it seems like maybe it could happen soon again. So my instinct would be B, but I'll just check the next factor. So social norms, yeah, okay, I can see this. If your neighbors are all getting extra flood insurance, you might feel pressure to do that too. That's part of being human. Anchoring, I don't think is it, because that's just like the first piece of information that you ever heard about, like flooding and geography and things. I don't think that is as related as B. Okay, next question, we have perfect competition. We have MC equal to MR usually. So Q1, this is their cost. Their costs are higher than their price. They're making a subnormal profit. And that to me means that there's going to be firms that were in the market now trying to leave the market. So they are going to leave the market, causing the price to go up. And if I had any success at drawing this, and I'm sketching this in the exam kind of situation, that should cause normal profits. That's what I would expect happens in the long term. Usually you learn about profit scenarios, right? But it could always be like the opposite, subnormal profit. So it sounds like B, some firms will leave the market and the prices will rise because like there's less market supply. Here we have a seller of vacuum cleaners, and it was very innovative. However, rivals are now challenging them and they have developed their own designs. So if they are challenging someone who is really good at innovating, that must be really innovative. And it's also a competitive market. So I don't think it's like collusive oligopoly. This is like the one Joseph Schumpeter, creative destruction, that competitive markets are always destroying things by innovating. That sounds about right. So the next question is we need to work out the marginal propensity to consume. Now, my instinct is this is going to be a long-winded question because they haven't actually given you any data to work that out directly. They've given you data that I know that we can use to work out the multiplier. So the fourth equation to work out the multiplier is to work out your change in national income divided by your injection. This is one way of working out the multiplier. So the change in national income was 5 billion. They only spent 2 billion to make that happen. So that's 2.5 as the multiplier. And then I reckon we can use the other equation for the multiplier as 1 divided by 1 minus MPC to then work out the MPC value. We'll have to rearrange that. I'm a little bit rusty on this, but let's go for it. So it'll be 1 equals 2.5. I'm just going to multiply both sides of this by 1 minus MPC. That's my trick to get rid of the bottom. And then I am going to get rid of this like 2.5 factor again by doing the same to both sides. So I'm going to divide by 2.5, divide by 2.5 on both sides. 1 minus MPC. And then I need to get the MPC all by itself. So now I'm going to add MPC to both sides. Oh, actually, no, I don't want to do that because I still have this kind of fraction that is not being so nice. And let me get rid of all these brackets I don't really particularly need. Okay, so let me do MPC equals 1 minus 1 over 2.5. Now 1 is 2.5 over 2.5, and then I can do minus this, which gives me 1.5 over 2.5, and I reckon that is around 0.6, which is the MPC. Okay, that was pretty hard for 1 mark. Which of the following describes the position of the economy at the end of each year? Okay, what do we have? So an economy is producing at its long-run productive capacity at the start of 2020. This is my long-run AS. And has a trend rate of growth of 6% per year. So the long-run AS should be shifting. So it's 6% higher in 2021. Interesting. Here we have real GDP. I'm not 100% sure if they were talking about real GDP before, but let's assume they were. Because I think that's fair. Usually with these things you do talk about real GDP, but I actually don't know. Okay, so anyway, instead of increasing by 6%, it increases by 2%. Okay, so if I were to kind of put this as a PPF, so I'm kind of like bouncing around. We started at A, we started on the PPF. Okay, so I think I will do this. So this has shifted up by 6%. However, the real GDP has actually only increased by 2%. So let's just put this like here. That's 2%. So in 2021, we had no negative output gap, we were at productive potential, and now we are inside our PPF. So that is a negative output gap. Right, what happens next? Then we have growth of 10% in 2022. So your PPF increases another 6% because that's the long run growth. So we had a growth of 2% and we are now increasing that. Let's say, you know, my GDP is 102. Now we're increasing that by 1.1, by 10. So it would be like 104-ish. Overall, your economy has grown up. Wonder if that's correct. Might take a break here. Hang on, I'm getting stuck. I think this is correct, yeah. So overall, so it's gone up by 10%, which should be 10.2, which gives us roughly 112. That means it's gone up by 12% in total, your real GDP. But your potential growth went up by 6%, and then it went up by another 6%. So imagine if it were 100, then it went up to 106, and then it went up 6% above 106, which is greater than the change of the initial, 6 points. So I'm just going to say, like, imagine it's like 7 points, just for the sake of the example. Overall, I reckon we have a very slight negative output gap. Okay, I'm not happy with that question. If you have a better way of doing that one, let me know. Next one, we have question 12. We have MV equals PQ. Which part of the equation do they normally consider stable? Okay, you just need to memorize this. This is just, this is just memorized thing. So usually you would think this is stable and the velocity is stable, which is V, and Q, which is a D. The Keynesian economists will say, oh no, this isn't stable. For example, in a boom, people get overexcited and their spending patterns actually change, like the velocity of what they buy changes. Anyway, won't go into that in too detail. The next one, number of workers, total output, we're looking for diminishing marginal returns. Now to do that, we need to work out marginal returns or marginal output. Doesn't really matter, the phrasing. As I increase the hiring from 1 to 2 workers, for example, output has increased by 20, so that's my marginal output. And for that to be diminishing marginal returns, I need that increase to then start to decrease. So 28 to 54, maybe I should bring my calculator with me. I probably can do this without the calculator, but it's not happening right now. So this is 26. Still increasing marginal product. What if we go from 3 to 4 workers? 82 minus 54. This is 28, still increasing. 4 to 5 workers. That could be it. Yeah, this is it. So from here to here, we have 19 marginal output. So I think that is going to be the answer. Oops, sorry, I just have like a notification here pop up. So when we go from the 4th to the 5th worker, when we hire the fifth worker, the marginal output begins to fall. And so for me, that would be the answer. Okay, did I skip something? No. Okay, a firm faces downward sloping demand curve. They discover that any increase or decrease, okay, keyword here, any change basically. Any change leads to a fall in revenue. So with a downward sloping demand curve, you are going to have a total revenue curve that looks kind of like a mountain. And it's going to peak right in the middle. This is like your revenue max. So I reckon the only place that you could have revenue falling on both sides, so if you increase price or if you decrease price from P1, is that peak. That peak happens right there when there's various ways to identify that. Either the PD is -1 or MR is 0. So I'm looking for something like that. Oh yeah, they're asking about marginal revenue, which would be 0. Which of the following is most likely to result in a divorce of ownership from control? Okay, so the company should be pretty large. Oh, because they've divorced, right, there's going to be managers, as owners, they're different people, they've got to communicate, they've got to have the same incentives. And what tends to happen is that the people running the company can diverge from the profit max incentive. They could try and maximize their own salary, or they could have like concerns to people please. So I don't think as profits are maximized, shareholders make all decisions. No, this is now split. There's also the managers. Satisficing, that's about right. Government intervention moves the economy from point A to point B, and then the economy by itself moves from point B to C. Right, so what's going on? The government tried to reduce unemployment and they created inflation. I reckon that they did some kind of like expansionary policy, AD related policy, showing that kind of trade-off. But the shift from B to C, for me, I'm looking for some kind of adaptive expectations. That's just something to learn about the Phillips curve. If there's adaptive expectations, so if people are becoming used to expecting inflation rate of 2 instead of inflation rate of 1, then they could start like wage bargaining, they could start like preemptively buying goods. Anyway, that would raise firms' costs, which would create more unemployment than before. So I'm looking for something like that. This is the one. Economic agents have higher inflation expectations. They have adaptive expectations due to the resulting inflation. Which of the following is the role of the OBR? This is like a fact checker. So I'm looking for something like this. Deciding, they don't make decisions about allocation. Enabling, they don't do that. Evaluating, yeah. So this is like the fact checker role, right? The government says, I'm going to have a budget deficit of 100 billion, and they're going to try and check that. Do they recommend? They don't, they just present like the stats. Which of the following is a policy that the Bank of England is most likely to undertake if it wants to increase the money supply? Right. We're looking for something that allows the banks to like multiply their money, or the Bank of England injecting more money into the system. So A already looks like a pretty good candidate, where the increased purchases of government securities. So if the Bank of England is buying government securities, well, like, you know, the Bank of England had all this much money and is just now giving it to the government. Or if the banks owned the securities and it's just giving it to the banks, and then what do the banks do with the money? The banks will then give out to households and businesses in the form of loans. So that already pretty much sounds like a good thing, that the government will spend it if they receive it. So directly I think that would help, but also if you are, for example, buying government bonds, what's happening is you're increasing the demand for government bonds. And then in that sense, you're increasing the price of the government bonds, which will cause the yield of them to fall. It has the opposite relationship. So bonds aren't as attractive as before. So then that means you're going to flood all the other markets with liquidity. Actually, that's not too relevant to this question. I would go with this one as probably being it. Increase market interest rates. That would mean that people want to take out less money. Increase capital ratio. That means that the banks have to basically save more money. So don't think those are the answers. Carrots and potatoes are grown using the same factors of production. Right, that means that they're kind of like substitutes in the supply. If you produce carrots, you can't produce potatoes with the same land, that kind of thing. All right, what do we have? So we have market for carrots is more carrots are being demanded and more carrots are therefore being supplied. That means you've used our valuable land that you can't use for for potatoes. So that would explain why the supply of potatoes is shifting left as less land for the potatoes, because people are busy producing carrots. Which of the following explains the changes? So I'm looking for something like that, and I'm looking for basically resources got allocated towards carrots and there's less land available to make potatoes. Demand curve for carrots shifts due to the rationing function of prices. No, I think the demand curve for carrots just shifted because change in people's preferences. So this was a shift. Remember that price of the carrots won't cause a shift. The price of carrots increases because carrots and potatoes are in derived demand. That's not the type of demand that they have. Derived demand is like labor and housing. If you produce more housing, you need more labor. The price of potatoes increases because potatoes and carrots are in joint supply. No, joint supply means they have to be produced together. Something would be like beef and leather. If you want leather, you must have beef. If you want beef, you must have leather. Potatoes and carrots, they just share the same land, but they are competing to be produced. So actually, they are the opposite, basically, of joint supply. That leaves D. Let's check it. The supply curve for potatoes shifts due to the incentive function of prices. I actually don't like that option. I don't think that's pretty clear. But okay. Yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. So because price of carrots are going up, the suppliers are responding to that incentive by expanding production. There is less production of potatoes. Okay, let's just go for that one. Right, MSB, MPB curve, socially optimum level. Okay, it's a nice question compared to some of the rest. All you do to get the social optimum is set MSB equal to MSC, and that's it. Which of the following would be classified as a debit item? So this is something that removes money out of the country or out of the business in the secondary income section. Right, secondary income section is part of your current account. So inside your current account, you have like 6 lines. You have your balance of trade in goods, your balance of trade in services. Then you have your balance of trade, which is the sum of 1 and 2. And then you have something called primary income, which is earned income. Like, for example, your wages, all that kind of stuff. You're coming in from abroad and then sending abroad. And then you have your secondary income, which is your unearned income that's given to you. So it's income for you, but you didn't earn it. Usually that's like things like aid or remittances. Remittances are payments by migrant workers back to their family. So I'm looking for something like this. I'm looking for something related to aid or remittances. And it has to be a debit item. So money has to be leaving the UK. So, for example, I'm looking for like the UK sending aid or the UK sending remittances. Dividends is earned money. Emergency aid provided to another country. That's it. The money is leaving the UK and it's going to the other country. The other country is receiving that income, but it's not earned income. Investment building a factory. This would be in the financial account. Premiums paid by UK-based organisations to foreign insurance companies. This looks like it would be income, earned income for the foreign companies. That would be the primary income, I think. coffee or tea that two countries can produce. Okay, what do we have? We have country X that can clearly produce a lot more coffee. So they are winning in terms of coffee and they have absolute advantage in terms of tea. Country Y is clearly smaller in both cases, but it looks like producing tea is... Actually, let's kind of work out the opportunity cost. As you can see, in today my mental math is not as good. So let's work out the opportunity cost. You could probably, you know, work this out. We're not calculating it, but hey, today it is not happening. So the opportunity cost, right, to produce one coffee, country X has 100,000 tea divided by 80,000. So they have to sacrifice 1.25 tea. And to produce one tea, you have to sacrifice 0.8 coffee. It's just the inverse of that. Country Y to produce, so what did I do there? I did 100,000 divided by 80,000, just so I can get that down to 1. And then over here I did the other way around. I did 80,000 divided by 100,000. So here we have one coffee will require 75,000 divided by 50,000. $1.5 T. And then take the inverse of that, or you could just like work it out. So 1 T what would this be? 0.66 coffee. From this, who has comparative advantage in coffee? So who can produce it cheaper? It is country X. And then who has comparative advantage in tea? It is country Y. So you never have comparative advantage in both goods, but country X has comparative advantage in the production of coffee. Yeah, that's what we said. And has absolute advantage in the production of tea. We saw that too, that you can just produce more. That sounds pretty good. If you wanted to check the other ones, you could, but yeah, otherwise that is okay. Right, where are we now? Question 23. Sterling and Canadian dollars, right? Has the Canadian dollar strengthened or weakened? Okay, let's figure out how to do this one. So we have I think we should start with this one, which is talking about like Canadian dollars. So we had £1 that could give you $1.76 in 2021, and in 2022, £1 can give you less than before. So that means that the pound has depreciated, which means that the Canadian dollar has appreciated against the pound. So the Canadian dollar has strengthened against the pound. So we can already disregard C and C and D. Right, okay, next one. We need to see if it's weakened against the euro. So we are given data that £1 could get you €1.11. £1 could give you €1.19. So what we see here is that the pound is able to buy you more euros than before. So the pound has actually appreciated against the euro. But because the Canadian dollar has increased against the pound, then the Canadian dollar must have appreciated even more against the euro. So it should also be strengthening against the euro, which gives us A. Regulatory capture describes a situation in which, okay, this is just basically when corruption sets in to a regulatory agency because they're helping the firm instead of regulating them. Firms suffer a fall in profit. No, I'm looking for some kind of corruption thing. Yeah, that's it. Industry regulators grow too close to the firms they are regulating. So basically they have friendly relationships with them. They're helping them instead of doing their job. So we have perfect competition labour market. Which of the following combinations would mean wages are likely to increase? So this is a competitive market. Wages only increase if the supply of your labour falls or the demand of your labour shifts to the right. So the supply of labour will fall if basically costs, wrong way around. If like there's more barriers to entry to get into that industry, or it's less desirable to get into that industry. And then the demand the demand would increase if like the products that they sell are doing good, or like the labor is more productive. So I'm looking for something like this. We are not looking for a fall in demand. We are fall in wages with similar skill requirements and a fall in the price of the substitute. Okay, so people are going to buy substitute, not the good, so they're not going to be needing as much labor in this market because it's going to the substitute good. An increase in the minimum qualifications. This sounds like a barrier to entry. So it's harder for the workers to get into this market. The price of a complement is falling, so that means that you will buy this good because it's cheaper to buy both the complement and this good. So you'll have more demand for this product. And as a result, you will be needing more labor. So that two factors there sound great. Which of the following is most likely to affect the elasticity of demand in a particular occupation? So like the gradient of that, you could simplify it down. The proportion of employers, total costs, that's it. Made up by wages, sure. Because otherwise they're going to get really sensitive to hire people, and they might even start replacing them with machinery or with labor. So if it's a high percentage of total cost, they're going to take their time to employ people and consider substitute options. Here we have a Lorenz curve. It can be concluded that income distribution has been, so year one, it was further out and it's shifted in. This is what happens when you get more equal. Why? Because the line of equality is this one here in the middle. So you're getting closer to the line of equality. And your Gini coefficient always takes the area that you are separated from this line of equality. So let's call this area A. And then divides it by the total area below. So you can see A is shrinking. A has decreased. So the Gini coefficient is area A divided by A plus B. So this has overall decreased because of that. So you should have Gini coefficient decreasing, and it's more equal the country. A redistribution of government spending towards funding research and development shifts the long-run AS curve, right? Productivity should increase. It was in welfare before, so you might have some groups having a fall in productivity. Which of the following is the most likely effect? So we can see here, like, prices are falling, there should be growth, maybe there's more employment. Prices are falling makes me think it could be B, because you should be selling more exports inside your balance of trades. But let's double check that, because that's quite, could happen, but it's not, super related to what would be the most direct impacts. An increase in the size of a government's budget deficit. Yeah, so if you... actually, they were spending before, and they're just shifting spending, that they were spending somewhere else, and this spending is going somewhere that's maybe returning you more of a return. So I actually don't necessarily think that's it. You are moving your long run AS, so this kind of thing is like unlikely, so I would probably go with that one. Which of the following is an example of moral hazard? Moral hazard is when you take extra risks because you're not paying for all the risks. So it's not about asymmetric information. Banks engage in more risky lending. That sounds pretty good if they believe the central bank would support them in a crisis, right? They're taking on more risks because they're not facing all the risks. The central bank is being assumed to going to help them. Government budget balance for an economy. From 2019 to 2023, the national debt of this economy has increased by, right, here's another calculation question. So we are told that they had a surplus and they had a deficit in different years. And we have to work out between 2019 and 2018. Okay, so to just get the national debt, we need to work out how much money have they overspent compared to how much money did they save. So if you're in this region, you saved money. And if you're in this region, you like spent the savings and maybe went beyond. So overall, you saved 175 plus 100. You saved 275. And then you spent, what is it, 25, 100, 200. You overspent 325. So the national debt in the economy, the difference is 50 billion. Okay, that's it. Great. So hopefully you enjoyed this Section A multiple choice guided walkthrough for AQA. If you find these videos helpful, let me know. Thank you very much for watching. Let me try and